And we're now recording. This is SIG Network from Thursday, March 4th, 2021. Tim, you should be able to share your screen and take us away with some triage.
Excellent. Where are we? Here we go. Let's make sure I get the right window. How's that?
Beautiful.
Looks good.
Excellent. We have a very small number today, which is great. Whoop.
I mean,
Somebody says,
yeah, I fixed it this past week. Don't tell me that it came back.
2 hours ago.
Okay, well.
I didn't want to assign you without your approval.
No, that's. I mean, this test was chasing me since I started to contribute to Kubernetes. But
As Liggett reminded me yesterday, no good deed goes unpunished. Okay. Node local DNS cache breaks external DNS updates. I read this over. I have no idea why it would do this. And it needs somebody to go and look at it as to why. Volunteers? Anybody's familiar with the node local? I don't know if Pavitra is here. I can always assign it to her if nobody else wants to step it. Nobody? Okay. Pod probes lead to blind SSRF from the node. So this is a fun one. I thought it was worth discussing here. It's not new, like this has come up before, and it's thought it was just worth discussing just briefly here. The issue here is you can configure a readiness probe with a host field. The idea was supposed to be so you could talk to localhost or something, but because it's arbitrary, the kubelet will send its HTTP request to that host. You don't get to see the results of that, and it's only a get, but if you were able to find someone who had a non-safe get operation, or if you were probing to find valid URLs, you would get to see the response code from this. So you would know whether it was a 200 or something else. So in that sense, it is an info leak, and it was disclosed as a security issue. And so the question is really, is this a useful feature enough that we should consider doing more than just disabling it the same way we disabled external IPs? That's the discussion at the bottom. Tim Allclair suggested that. We wrote this admission controller to just disable external IPs. Maybe we should just do the same thing with this, but I thought it was worth bringing here. Anybody got thoughts?
I saw one or two discussions of people using this to poll external services. I know that is not right, but I mean, people is using it.
I agree, and if I recall, Mike Spreitzer, who we haven't seen here in a while, was using it to do something clever with segmented networks. So I do believe there are reasons that people might want to use this, and strictly getting rid of it is not an option, right? The best we can do is give cluster admins an option to disable it, or we find a better answer. I'm not sure what the better answer is, short of like writing another policy language, which obviously we don't want to do.
Well, we don't want to do that as a solution to this, but like there are a handful of things like the enforcement of unique pod IPs and the whole ambiguity of whether the liveness probe means the pod is running the process it's supposed to be running versus it's connected to the network, and how that interacts with Ready++. So there are like arguments for, yeah, we should kill this all off and totally redesign probes.
Yes, but we can't, I mean, again, like we have to keep the equivalent
yeah.
here.
I mean-
So we can come up with V2. Oh God, I didn't just say that out loud. We can think about what we might want to have done instead, but we should decide if we're going to mitigate this. I feel like we should do something here. I don't have anything smarter than that admission control. So we don't need to debate it too much here. I didn't put it on the agenda for real discussion, but it's sort of a fun issue. And if anybody wants to think about it and or weigh in on it, please do. 99425. Absent any other signal, we'll probably just pursue the admission control option. I assign this to myself.
Just to let you know, folks, we've discussed about this issue on the SIG Network Policy API on Monday, and folks were already thinking about as a long term if the cluster scoped network policy targeting maybe host would be something. So I don't know if Abhishek and Satish, they are here, but they have started to think about this as a long term also, if we should support the node selector and this being somehow a user story for this. Just
okay. Interesting idea. All right, next. Kube proxy Iptable's wrong configuration for external traffic policy local in large clusters. It's basically the user is reporting that sometimes they see that their local pods aren't showing up in the local set of endpoints. And I think they said they're using metal LB. So traffic is arriving at the node and black holing because it doesn't have a local endpoint. I asked here, my suspicion is this probably has something to do with pods coming up and down, so the pods aren't ready yet, or propagation delay or something like that. Andrew, I don't know if you're here, but I wonder if this has to lean into your terminating endpoints and daemon set stuff. So if you're not here, I tagged you on the issue. In the meantime, can somebody volunteer to maybe poke at this and see if they can get more information out of the user? Anybody?
You can assign this one to me, Tim.
Nice. Thank you. Another test flake. This one actually opened by Antonio and assigned to JUnit. Jay, are you here?
No, he's not.
No, okay. He was assigned, I'll just ping it then. And service refuses traffic to endpoints after updating selected pod label. This is one that Antonio pretty definitively proved to be DNS. Whoops, I don't know what I just did. But the user asked for some follow-up, and I don't really know what they're asking for follow-up on. So they specifically mentioned GKE. Is anybody else from the Google side here today?
Yeah, I'm here.
Rob, do you think you can chase down if there's something to try to follow up with on this, or if it's really just the user experiencing the gaps between systems responding?
I don't know that there's much, but I'll take a look. You can assign it to me.
And I can work with you, Rob, also.
Ah,
Cool.
Pavitra is here.
Yep.
Pavitra, I don't know if you saw earlier, I already assigned you one. So
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yes, I saw that.
that's it. That's all the triage I've got. Back to you, Casey and Dan.
Sorry, I went to click on
I
mute.
I do have the next item,
you do.
which was just a reminder about the Cube 121 code freeze is March 9th, which is like next Tuesday. So beware if you have enhancements make sure those enhancements are completed by March 9th. Otherwise, your enhancement will get removed from the milestone. You'll have to get an exception to add it back in. So
And
March
to
PRs,
echo
please request reviews of those PRs from people.
that one, if people need PR reviews, it's best to request them now, today, even if the PR is not quite complete, because I'm sure that, like myself, Dan and Casey and all of the highly contended reviewers have a queue. So get your stuff into the queue ASAP, and we can do our best to get them reviewed.
And I'm just going through the list and looking and seeing that of the 10 SIG network enhancements that we have for 121, 5 of them are listed as being at risk. So maybe check those out. I'm adding the links to the specific enhancements.
Thanks, Bridget.
Is Jay here?
He actually asked me, and Antonio is not going to escape from me as well, to proxy what he put in the item in the agenda. So we have a really old issue. It's from 2016 of folks asking for port ranges on services. And I guess there is some discussion about the environment variables that were added previously to support the same behavior as Docker links and so on, but like too long didn't read. The question is if we should again bring this service port ranges to something now that network policy also accepts port ranges and check if what are the user stories, and because we are seeing folks asking like, I want to run my WebRTC server inside Kubernetes, but I need to open like a bunch of UDP ports on my load balancer, and those are port ranges. And Jay asked me kindly to bring this to you and be beat by you folks because he ran about this idea. So what do you think about this? And if should we tackle this again or not? Then put a good comment about, then we should put a good comment about environment variables. But I think this is solvable. Like if you use service port range, we are going to disable the environment variable injection in your pod. This is the main problem. But I want to listen to you because I have no strong opinions about that.
I think it's a great idea that we should totally do, but we can't. And the main reason that I recall, there were two reasons. One, the API for port and target port means that people assume you can remap ports. It seems obvious that you'd be able to remap a range, like it should just be an offset. It's not. Iptables is not implemented that way. There is no way to do a port range in Iptables that remaps to a different port range. It'll let you specify a range and a target, and then it'll map all of those ports to one port. So thanks, Iptables. And even worse, IPVS has no way of representing port ranges. There was an attempt to do this by using FW marks and saying, well, if you set mark 0, then you mean this range, and mark 1, then you mean that range, which means you can only have 32 minus however many bits you use, distinct ranges in a cluster, which isn't going to fly.
But
so
if we go ahead, Tim. Sorry.
No, you go ahead, and then I'll jump to my conclusion later.
Yeah, I was going to ask if the user doesn't use cluster IP and headless services. This is like doable by the DNS, right? Because you solve a service name to a pod IP. I guess the biggest problem is like if the service is a load balancer, probably the cloud load balancer should talk directly to the pod IP and the port ranges. But the idea of like exposing, opening the load balancer, the cloud load balancer, like I want to open my Google Cloud Load Balancer in this range and point to these pods directly.
Yeah, curiously, the load balancers are actually reasonably well equipped to do this. Node ports is another issue, right? If I have a range of ports, do I open a range of node ports also? Node ports being a very limited resource. The biggest problem is that we have too many things that, like environment variables, that want to enumerate all of the ports and expand the list. The conclusion that I came to was that the better answer is to see if we can figure out how to do whole IP forwarding. Basically, you can have a list of individual ports, or you can just forward the whole dang thing. And it seems like all the load balancers are capable of doing that too. In that case, we would say, like, there is no node port, right? And we could, like you said, for environment variables, we can just sort of define it away. The problems there are that you're required to, that the API requires you to specify at least one port in the ports array. So you've got to specify something, even if it's not something that you wanted. Anyway, Pavitra, I think you were working on that, a doc on this, weren't you?
This is for the multiple ports. This is for all the ports.
For all ports.
Yes, yeah. I've not gotten it into the CAP form yet, but I intend to.
Okay. So, Ricardo, do you think that that would satisfy the use case here?
I don't know. I to be honest, I was like, Jay caught me on like surprise, and I didn't read the entire historic again. So I don't know if it solves the whole user story here. But
it's.
I was going to say, it is really unclear what the user request here is. I commented on this like a few months ago on this PR. If you Google SIP Kubernetes, this is the PR that you find. And I think most of the people here just want a solution that makes SIP on Kubernetes work. And several people have commented in this PR that the proposed feature would not actually solve that use case. So like it requires investigation. Okay.
Yeah, I am no means a SIP or VoIP expert. SIP is the case that I always hear here for people who need thousands of ports. For those few customers that I've talked to about this, they seem to be happy with the idea of, well, we'll just forward the whole port, right? And just don't listen on things that you don't want to publish at that point.
If I may, it's the
Cal, please.
Yeah, it's coming from the running NVAs on Kubernetes. So if you're running load balancer on Kubernetes, think I want to run a load balancer as a pod. Irrespective of what it does in terms of IP tables, its own user space or whatever, it just want to receive anything that comes to this IP. So this is basically the use case. SIP falls into this use case. The load balancers, especially like non-VXLAN stuff, well, you need something like that and so on. So it all falls down and into that thing. That's why if you go to clouds today and you ask for a load balancer and say forward everything, they allow you to do that just to run an MVA-like component inside your VNet.
So whole port or whole IP forwarding would satisfy, you think?
Should work, but it's not designed to run anything below L4. So if you have anything that needs anything below L4, that's not the solution. I don't know who would need anything below L4 to work as a pod.
Okay, so whole IP cross protocol.
Yes,
like a single protocol.
Yeah, just send me everything on any port, be it TCP, IP, TCP, UDP, whatever. I'm just gonna process it all. Don't worry about me.
Right.
So that's what most people talk about.
Yeah, that seems like a workable feature if we can figure out how to sort of bend the API without breaking it. This is a place where past assumptions are locking us in a little bit.
But it's API compatible to say, if you set this new service type, then you don't have to specify a port, isn't it? Because that doesn't break validation of any existing objects.
We might be able to spin it that way. That's not the way it's currently written, but we could probably spin it that way.
How about
I hadn't, it's actually a good idea. I had not thought about it as a different type. I'd thought about it as type cluster IP or node port, or sorry, cluster IP or load balancer. Interesting.
Yeah. How about port 0, 1 entry, port 0, port 0?
Unfortunately, the way we currently have the spec written is that 0 is not allowed explicitly. So this is where we get in the finities of interpreting compatibility, right? 0 was never allowed. So possibly there's a client out there who sees 0 and says this is invalid. If we now allow it, are we breaking that client, and do we care?
Why would a client worry about that?
Man, Hiram's law.
Okay. All
Which
right.
one is that?
Anything that is exposed by your product is part of your API. Okay, so Ricardo, I'm supportive of the whole IPs idea if we can figure it out. If there's interest in pushing it forward, I know Pavitra did some work thinking about it. Maybe you can sync up.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell Jay also and sync with you folks. Thank you.
Yep. And I'll get that kept written in some form so we have something to reference.
Yeah,
because we have a shortage of caps here.
I have some more for the next release. Okay. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Ricardo. Rob, you had the next couple.
Yeah, okay, so a couple small ones. Well, first one small. A couple meetings ago, I mentioned that we were looking into renaming Service API to Gateway API. That happened. So just so you know, if you're hearing about Gateway API or if you're looking for Service APIs, that's what it turned into. The other thing is I sent something out to the mailing list a couple days ago. We have gone back and forth in the CAP and everywhere, it feels like, for a while about how we should configure topology, if we should configure topology, etc. This is something that's easy to do in isolation because we said, well, we really just want to either enable this and have some automatic approach or not. Just a very simple on-off idea, and hopefully we can just get it good enough that we can do it by default eventually. So that was what inspired all of this. At the same time, there was other work going on traffic policy. So we already have external traffic policy local. In 121, we're adding internal traffic policy local. And the combination of these configs can potentially get confusing. So you can imagine it could be common to say, I want external traffic to go local to stay on the node it arrives at. And I want internal traffic to be topology aware. That seems like a really common combination. There's a lot of different ways to represent that. I outlined some of them in that email thread, and I want to make sure that what we're proposing here actually makes sense, not just in the context of this one CAP, but in the context of the broader service API, so that when you look at all these independent fields, the combinations make sense. I think Antonio had a good idea, and I think the last response on that thread, which was maybe for now we should just start with an annotation. It's, you know, once you have an annotation, you basically have to support that forever, I think. But that is one way that might be relatively simple to introduce this. It's something that's certainly not going to be required on every service. It's kind of an opt-in or maybe eventually an opt-out kind of thing. But yeah, just wanted to open some conversation here. If anyone has strong opinions on this, this is a great time to get them out there.
I'm going to hold my tongue until other people have a chance. Okay. So the biggest issues that are swirling for me, just to catch everybody else up, right now we know that our implementation of topology is not going to be perfect in that there's no feedback. We don't have any utilization or anything. So it's possible that you can end up in a situation where you have really pathological performance. It's, like you'd have to sort of cross 3 different streams to get there, but it's possible to do. And so we felt like there has to be some way to say, no, back this out. I don't want it. Then the question that Antonio asked that I thought was insightful was, is this really part of the API or is it part of the implementation? Because you can imagine an alternate kube proxy implementation, right? And when I say kube proxy, I mean like the entire proxying subsystem, right? You can imagine an alternate kube proxy implementation that does have really great topology behavior and really doesn't have these weird corner cases and should just be on by default because who would want to turn it off? And in that case, do we really want an API that says, and let me turn you off, right? That actually imposes requirements on an implementation to be able to disable topology. And so I kind of started to come back around to the idea of this as an annotation that says, hey, implementation, I know what I'm doing and I know who you are, and I want you to not do this. So that's kind of where I'm sitting with it right now. It's also the easiest thing to back out of. If we get that wrong and we decide we do need a field, we can always add a field, right? But ideally, the end state is topology is just on and everybody uses it without having to say anything at all, right? And the more fields we add, the more we lock people out of that.
Just one clarification on that annotation. Yeah, that's a really great summary. I know when we talked about a field here, we had talked about at least starting with an opt-in and transitioning to an opt-out when we felt comfortable enough that the opt-in was performant and enough people like that and we're using it. Are you suggesting that we start with an opt-out and not provide an opt-in? I mean, separate from a feature gate.
I think for alpha, we can totally get away with that. In fact, we could say for alpha, I mean, the PR currently is implemented this way, right? Like if you turn on the feature gate, you're getting topology. Everybody's getting topology and there is no opt-out. And that seems totally reasonable for alpha. When we move to beta, we will have to think hard about whether we're ready to turn it on for everybody. The answer is probably not, right? I mean, unless we totally fix up the corner cases, which seems unlikely in a reasonable time frame. In which case, we'll probably have the annotation be an explicit opt-in, but it's an implementation note, right? You're saying, I know what the implementation is and I'm choosing to opt in. Later, the implementation could choose to opt you in and that annotation becomes a no opt, and we're still within both the letter and the spirit of the API contract.
Yeah, makes sense.
As opposed to making it a field where we really have to respect what the user said there.
Works for me.
Nobody has more thoughts? Everybody's quiet today? Everybody's busy doing perf reviews? That's just us.
Just thinking a little bit slower than you're talking.
Sorry.
I get it though.
Well, we don't need to, I mean, these meetings are great, but the thread is there for all the people who want to think async, right? So.
Yeah, I pulled that up. I'm definitely gonna give that a read. Was the next one yours as well, Rob? There was one about low number node ports.
It was not mine.
Okay. Really? You didn't put the number of node ports on there? I saw it on the agenda.
It is on the agenda. It just has no one who claimed ownership of it. So
Benjamin raised this topic in the channel the other day, but this came recurrently. I mean, I think that every 2 months or something. And I remember someone in one of the meetings asking for this, but there is an option to configure the node port range. I'm not going to try to put a low range, but if somebody tries and doesn't work, they can open a bug.
Yes. Is there? Oh, there's new responses on this. Wow, this bug is old, isn't it? Yeah, 2015. I haven't seen the new updates. Is there any updates to this? Okay, so it's more the same. People want to use node ports on low numbers because they're treating it like a node service.
They can do it.
They can, but they have to configure their whole cluster for it, right? And then the risk is if you say allow ports 0 to 32K, then when you use the node port allocator, you might get randomly allocated port 22.
Yeah, but we
Right.
have the binding.
But we don't do the binding
Yeah,
at API time, right?
Okay,
we don't do it at the API. So the API might assign you 22 and you're just going to sit there trying to claim 22, right? Which seems like a terrible idea. Which is why it's turned off, and it's very much in the like, you're free to do this, but you get to keep the pieces when it explodes. I'm happy to go look at it and respond again. At some point we had sketched out like a hybrid model where there was a range that we would allocate from, but we would allow the user to manually request specific ports from another range. So if you ask for 22 and 22 is not claimed, then you can have it. But if you just don't ask for anything, you won't get allocated 22. That seems like it might be okay. The question is just, is it worth the effort? I mean, node ports were they were sort of designed to build load balancers on top of.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's node port is the typical hack that you have at home. You know, you forward the higher port to your service. So I mean, do we want to perpetuate this hack and build on top of that? Or I mean, I see like, I don't know, investing in something like this thing of forwarding things to the pod directly. I mean, because what you want is to expose something in a pod, and people don't want this high number. So
right.
I think that the end goal is to be able to forward something to the pod. I think that Carl mentioned something before. So maybe
at some point I had a script that was written around SOCAT that like you could run that with a host port, and whichever node it landed on, it would claim your port 80 and forward it on to an arbitrary service, right? So like maybe that's the answer for these folks, and like that way you're not actually allocating. I mean, host ports are a disaster for other reasons, but all right, I'll thank you for bringing it back up. I didn't know that this issue was still being debated. It's GitHub lost it in my email. If there's anybody from GitHub watching this recording, please fix your email system.
But it's so great as an excuse for absolutely everything in the world.
I couldn't do your performance review. I lost it in my GitHub. Sorry. All right, Antonio, were you looking for more resolution or just to bring up the fact that it's being discussed again?
No, I don't like node ports. I mean, I think that if we are not able to come with a, I don't know, it's smarter or more elegant solution than node port. I like the idea of Carl of being able to forward traffic to the pod. It can be cluster IP or whatever, but not this thing of, you know, building on top of forwarding ports to.
Okay, I'll have a read on this when I'm done, or when the meeting's done.
Cool. Bridget, I think you were next.
Oh, okay. So I felt motivated and actually looked at the 5 enhancements that the spreadsheet claims are at risk. One of them being taken care of. Another one can be removed from tracking for 1.21. There were 3 left. And Andrew Sai Kim, do you need help? Because they all have your name on them. Do you want to portion them out to other people to finish filling out all the exciting paperwork, TM? What's happening?
So I was reading 1959. I was reading the PR for that today. And so I think I sent some feedback on that one. Internal traffic policy we were discussing. This is the issue that Rob brought up. So that is very much in progress, and it's going to be under the door 8 a.m. before the professor gets in, sort of a situation. Optionally disable node ports. I have not seen a PR yet for that today, but it might very well be in my queue just further down.
It's probably worth having whomever feels the most informed about these comment on the issues in the enhancements repo that I'm linking, because the last comment as of like 20 minutes ago for each of those was, hello, you're going to miss the boat.
Okay.
So if somebody wants to comment on those and be like, don't worry, it's coming.
Yeah, sorry, I've been pretty busy with the internal release we have coming up.
Of course.
So yeah, the internal traffic policy, as Tim mentioned, Fengyan, someone on my team is working on that one. The load balancer class annotation also, I think, is close to review. Tim, if you could review that one, that'd be great.
I reviewed it like an hour ago.
Okay, awesome. For the optionally disable node port one, I had a PR open to add integration tests for that. I think Rob reviewed it. I think I need to address some of his feedback, but I think, aside from like adding some good E2E and integration test coverage, that should just be flipping the feature gate to beta. And I was hoping Lars might be able to look at that, but yeah, I haven't seen him on GitHub for a while. But yeah, I can, like once the integration test PR merges, I can just flip the switch if we're okay with turning that on beta for 121.
I think that's fine.
Which integration? Because you have one pending that merged 1 or 2 days ago. The allocate load balancer node ports.
Did that merge already?
Yeah.
Okay, then yeah, I guess I did add integration test, so I just need to flip the feature gate now. So while we're on this topic, there's also the work around Proxy handling terminating pods.
Yeah.
Which we're hoping to work on once we have the traffic policy stuff sorted out. I get the sense maybe it's too late for 121, but do we want to discuss that at all?
I mean, I forget the state where we left it. I thought we had come to pretty close to consensus on it, didn't we?
Yeah, so where we left off in 120 was, or actually, so in 120, we basically did the API changes in endpoint slice so that we have the serving and terminating condition. Early in 121, emerged a PR that basically adds like all the Proxy watch cache updates so that we have like the internal representation of the conditions in Proxy, but the actual proxy modes just ignore all the other conditions that aren't ready. But I think like, all the pieces are there, like the APIs are there. We just have to actually read the conditions and change the behavior based on what we want.
Is there, do we have have you started a PR for it? Do we have the tests around this stuff is always where it takes longer than you think it will, right?
Yeah, there is a PR open, but I haven't gotten to updating it. So like, I think the biggest question we had in 120 was if we wanted the fallback logic for internal traffic as well. And I think that's kind of where we left off.
I don't remember the thinking there. I'll have to go revisit it. Am I assigned that PR?
I don't think so, but
Okay.
yeah.
If you if you want to discuss it, please assign it to me. I will be going through all of my assigned PRs as rapidly as I can. If it's not assigned to me, I promise you I will miss it.
Yep, sounds good.
And I invite anybody who has a feeling about this to please help. I'll go update those 5 issues. Thank you for poking that.
That brings us to the end. Is there anything else folks wanted to see on the agenda that we didn't get to?
Yeah, I have one question. Tim, do you remember 2 weeks ago that you started saying that you wanted to comment something about a service API problem with ports that I don't know, I don't remember something that you cannot do an update or something like that.
You mean the cluster IP?
I don't remember, but I just said that you wanted to comment it, and I was curious because I was trying to find the issue, but I couldn't find it.
If you mean that one, I actually still have it open here. Let me paste you the link. Was it this one? The replace update doesn't work for cluster IP and node port?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually it's, yes. I'm interested in thinking about how to solve it. It's clearly not going to make 21.
What's the problem? I'm looking for a free lesson.
The problem is, all right, the problem statement is I did a put of a resource that set it to a particular state. And in that put, I left cluster IP out. I didn't say anything for cluster IP. And that means we go and we allocate you one, right? And then they do another put of the same state and it fails. And the argument is put should probably be idempotent in the sense that you should be able to do this. And it can't because we interpret that as you're trying to set the cluster IP to the empty string, which isn't what we allow. We don't allow you to change cluster IP. So what they're more or less asking for is recognize that the cluster IP wasn't set and don't try to change it. Don't basically interpret a put sort of as a patch. I argued against it at first, and if you read the whole discussion, I sort of softened at the end, and actually it starts to sound more reasonable. So I think we could actually do it, and it wouldn't be terrible. And I've certainly seen this issue come up enough times that I'm sympathetic to it. Node port is actually worse. If you have a YAML that specifies node port 0, then, or rather doesn't specify node port, and if you just reapply the same YAML over and over again, it will actually reallocate your node ports.
And is this related with the thing that you're replacing in the API with this big PR that
the rest?
Yeah, the
rest
rest
stuff?
inner outer thing.
I think they intersect in that the state of the REST stack after my changes will be easier to fix.
These things.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Well, thanks.
But my big change right now is stuck mostly on the daunting task of making sure all the test cases are there.
How is it that 2 puts should work?
That what should work?
To put a put on an existing resource should fail.
No, put is an update, right? 2 posts should fail. But even that, like depending on what you read about REST, there is no like book on REST, right? Or there are too many of them anyway. there's one school that says these operations should be idempotent, and applying the same context twice should work.
That's gates of hell, by the way. Just a heads up, because this is the case. Is gonna be on cluster IPs, IP families. I'm just enumerating things on one.
I'm well aware. I mean, I've spent enough time in that code with you that I understand exactly what is being asked for, and that's part of what I said in there. I was like, yeah, I'm sympathetic to the ideal. It's never been the yardstick that we measure our changes by. But I kind of like it, and if I could make it work reasonably easily, maybe we should. And I don't think this would be that hard, but I haven't had the time to really pursue it. So if anybody's interested in that, like, I'm happy to talk about it. But otherwise, it's just sitting in my queue of things to look at eventually.
I'd warn people to look at this just out of experience. Just telling you, be careful what you wish for.
Yeah.
Sign up
yeah.
for fun. Yeah. Yes. Fun.
Well, in the endpoint slice GA process, they ran into a little bump around compatibility, and I got to take Rob and Sweta on a little tour of the REST stack, which I relearned thanks to dual stack, Cal. So there's a lot of interesting magic going on in there.
I think my problem with these things is intent. Has always been user intent. It's very difficult to say, are you trying to set it to empty, or are you trying to set something else and you're okay with existing value? And it's
so read towards the end of that the issue that I linked. I think we could reasonably easily change cluster IP to a pointer, and then the intent is pretty clear. If you set it to the empty string, it's still an error. But if you leave it nil, then your intention was, I don't care.
Yeah, in this case, that will work. Okay. I'll look and see if I can help in any way.
It's an interesting read either way.
Yeah.
This is part of what I love about this project. We got really smart users.
Is the node port behavior correct, or is that something we can't change? I mean,
I can't imagine how we could call that correct. So what I would like, part of the reason that I haven't pursued this further is I want to think really more deeply and look through the code as to like understand why that's happening, because that was surprising to me. It feels like we can make a similar argument. Like if node port was a pointer and you don't specify anything, it means leave it alone. And if it's 0, then it explicitly means reallocate it. Right. And actually this goes to some of the dual stack stuff where we've talked. I mean, like dual stack, you can add a second IP, but not get rid of the first one. And Cal, I know that at some point I said, well, maybe we should just change that. And, you know, maybe the sending of an empty string means allocate me a different IP, right? Like it's semantically consistent. I don't have a real use case for it yet, but it was just sort of in my head.
But this is reminding me of a comment you made at several points in the dual stack stuff, where you were saying we don't change the user's input. Like if they don't provide a value, we can default a value in, but if they do provide a value, we shouldn't change it to something else. And I think if we were doing that 100% consistently, then this bug would be completely solvable. So I guess that means that was a good argument.
And part of it, I mean, it's coupled with this argument of in the past, we used the go 0 values to indicate unset, and that's ambiguous, right? So if somebody feeds me in an empty string, are they asking me for the empty string, or did they just not say anything?
Yeah, and also goes to if you're trying to implement a client SDK in other language where pointers are not a thing, it becomes really interesting to work with, because empty string is the only empty value. With Go, you have 3 states, right? A value, empty string, or a null. you're using a pointer. So it becomes problematic if you start looking at it from a bigger picture. Like, yes, you can solve for one and then another and then another and then another, but once you start looking for everything out there, it becomes a very hard problem to solve. Speaking of node ports even had this problem. I think we fixed it, which is, I'm switching my my service type to a different type that doesn't need node ports. Why are you
That's
asking
right.
me to clear them?
Yep,
And
we fixed that.
I remember we had hours of discussions around this, right? Because
Yep.
what if the user made a mistake, right? Now what? And then you add it with the no ports, the reservation of no ports. What if they wanted this port and then they made this mistake and then we released that port? Now the user is in a situation where, sorry, your port has been taken. Yes, it's unlikely to happen that fast. But yeah, it just goes into the discussion of user intent, and APIs are a thing that usually needs some serious thinking before doing anything.
Yes, I appreciate your consistent perspective on that. Give everybody 5 minutes back.
I think so.
Yeah, I'm just trying to reach Pavritha. Yeah, can you please share a link for the doc or an empty place for the doc where we can start huddling on the node port range stuff so we can think about it? I have space over the next couple of weeks to actually think and write stuff about that.
Now that dual stack is beta, Nikel's looking for a new project.
Let's hear it for follow through. Just kidding, Cal.
Cal has many ideas.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna.
They're all going to be great.
I'm probably gonna steer away from this stuff with the cluster IP being Twitter. I'm sorry, I suffered through changes, so maybe this one I'll set out and just watch. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I'd also like to say, in case anybody missed it, I mean, I think we talked about it last time, but the dual stack is beta now. So if you spin up a cluster from head today, you will see all the dual stack fields there. So have at it, beat on it, see if it makes sense. And already I've been playing with it, and it's looking good. I don't have a dual stack cluster, but I can still allocate dual stack IPs.
Yep, I did put in the pull request even to update the website to say this is how things are now. This is the new reality. So when 121 goes up, that's going up.
Whoop, whoop.
Cool. Well, I think that's probably a wrap for today. I'll see you guys later.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, folks.
Take care. We'll see you soon.